Thank you, Frank. Thank all of you for joining us today. This is our November edition of Ask Me Anything, and it's the first opportunity that I've had to invite guests in, and I'm joined by Rhonda, who's in charge of the equity division of the investment management division, the equity portion, which manages how many billions?
Just over 37 billion.
Yeah. She's responsible for $37 billion, and she's joined with two of her colleagues who have, over the last several months, if not years, have been working on bringing North Carolina's passive equity management in-house. We're one of the few state treasuries in the United States that does not and did not have in-house capability to manage internally index products. So I'm joined by Casey and Greg, who have been championing this for the last year or so. Over the last, for much of this year, they've been running a shadow portfolio, which means they've been setting up all the systems and all the processes so that this could be done in-house. And then the day after Halloween, on November 1st, we went live with this. And pleased to report that it's going smoothly. As you can imagine, doing something for the first time is, in their words, not mine. At some point, you got to make sure all the pipes are connected, and all the pipes were connected. So I want to have them in here today to applaud and to thank them on behalf of the State Treasurer's Office and the participants in these plans, because this is another example of putting a bow on something that will reduce complexity and build value for our participants. Rhonda did not know that she would be in here, but I just didn't know if you want to add a minute to my comments.
No, this has been a 3-year initiative, and Treasurer Folwell, you've been extremely supportive of our efforts and encouraging us to seek finality in this endeavor, and we appreciate your support.
Thanks. No, I just want to echo Rhonda's comments and just say thank you for the support, both yours and hers. And appreciate it.
And when you actually went live with this, and tell us what you were thinking at that moment when you didn't know that all the pipes were actually connected.
Well, yeah, it was not a small sum of money, so it was kind of a nerve-wracking moment, but we managed through it, and we were just happy that everything worked out.
Okay.
Yeah, I think this first couple of weeks were just double and triple checking everything. So far it's all been going smoothly, so that's promising.
And we started on November 1st with $100 million?
Yes.
$100 million of passive in-house index managing. We're using the Russell 200 index, as well as we have a mid-cap index. And in addition to that, they'll be bringing billions of dollars into this program over the coming months, so that this time next year, when we're having our November call, we'll be reporting that all of our external passive index managing is now being done in-house. So applaud all of you for your efforts. It's the best example of we're trying to figure out what's right, get it right, and keep it right, and I think we're on that path. So Frank will take that announcement and go right into your questions.
Great. Thank you, Treasurer. We'll start with Hazel Bradford with Pensions and Investments. Hazel, you with us?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, I am. Good morning, everyone. I have a lot of questions, so I didn't want to hog the whole day, but can you give me, and I apologize, I did start a bit late. This is something that's been in the works for how long? How long did it take you to get here?
It's been in the works for about almost 3 years, but when I came on board in January, I was presented with a timeline of how this could happen, and all during this process, this team has been focused on a big goal and a short deadline. That deadline was November 1st, and they hit it, and we're anxious to take the $100 million and ramp it up in a much larger way on January 1.
And what do you mean by much larger? Where do you want to go dollar-wise within the year?
The ultimate goal is, now that we have this platform and now that we have this process set up, that we'll be doing all passive U.S. Indexing internally.
And what portion of the portfolio is that? Will that be?
We currently have about $12.5 billion of U.S. passive index exposure. So it's about $12.5 billion. That represents about 30% of what Rhonda has responsibility for, and obviously it represents about 12% of the represents 30% of what Rhonda has responsibility for, and about 12% of the overall portfolio.
Overall, okay. And on the Rhonda, when you talk about Rhonda, are you going to be adding staffing for this, or are you going to build up that team, or what?
Well,
not just Rhonda, obviously.
They all look really passionate and
you're just going to add to their job description?
and very energetic. And these folks under Rhonda's stewardship have, sometimes I ask people to raise their hand and volunteer for the toughest jobs, and they've done that without complaint. And we appreciate them putting a bow on it.
So you're not adding staff?
No.
Okay.
Well, obviously we are always posting for positions inside the investment management division, but I'm answering your question specifically to this product. As we go further into next year and we start looking at other types of passive strategies that they may have an interest in, for example, international passive strategies, then obviously my answer may be a little bit different.
And that was my next question. Where do you want to look next on this initiative?
Well, I think I've answered it.
Okay.
That seems to be a natural place to go next.
Okay.
Obviously, international or European indexing is a little more cumbersome than domestic indexing with taxes and things of that nature. So we'll do what we've always done, which is to figure out what the right questions are before we start going after answers.
Hazel, you got any more follow-ups?
I have a lot. I don't want to hog the whole day.
That's all right. Well, if you want to, we can get to somebody else and come back to you before we're done.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay.
Dan, Hazel, we won't end the call until we come back to you.
Yeah, we promise.
Okay, good. Clear your schedule. Thank you.
No, we always enjoy questions from you, Hazel.
Thank you.
Dan Way with the Carolina Journal.
Well, I'll just follow up on Hazel's question there and ask, what are the major benefits from switching over to doing this internally?
Great question, Dan. Thank you for being so diligent about covering this call every month. This is just an extension of what we've been saying all year, is reducing complexity and building value for our participants. Anytime that we're asked a question about the major benefit, there's always one standard answer. We have a loyalty to our participants and a duty of care. Loyalty means we don't let anything get between us and them. And a duty of care means that we try to find things like this that we think bring value to them in their absence. So in dollar terms, we're going to save fees, obviously, that we're paying outside of the Treasurer's office for this to be done externally. And so the number one thing is that we're going to be saving external fees. But want to be clear, the external fees associated with passive equity management are not like some of the fees that you've heard me talk about in the past. Fees are generally pretty low, but the way that it's been presented to me and what I've grown to not only just understand but also certify is that we'll be saving even more fees for our participants. otherwise, I think it allows us to have, we have a custodian where our assets are domiciled, and I think just ad-libbing here for a moment, but I think it just allows us to have a little more control over where our assets are in terms of our custodial relationships.
So that give you more flexibility? I mean, in terms of how you change things out and the frequency, more navigability, market conditions, or how does that?
Obviously, it gives us a little more flexibility. Before, if I'm over speaking, Rhonda, just correct me. But before these accounts were actually opened, the equity or the section of the Treasurer's office really didn't have any brokerage accounts open. A fixed income side, where they managed $37 billion, has lots of relationships, because they're buying and selling bonds all day, every day. But this obviously opens up the avenue, and secondly, there's something that we have done in the past called security lending, where we get a few extra basis points by actually lending our securities. We don't do it as aggressively as a lot of other pension plans do it. And also the last thing, which happens with some of our passive managers, is that sometimes you have a tracking error of how our index would perform in relation to how the index itself performed. And a lot of that tracking error is associated with the cash flow of dividends being paid by the companies that are in the index and those dividends not being reinvested. And so just having more control over all that is exciting.
Okay. If I could, just a question of my own. The tax reform bill that's in Congress right now retains the tax-exempt status for municipal bonds, and of course state and local governments use those a lot as a funding mechanism for all types of infrastructure. So have you looked at that in any way to see, how does that impact North Carolina, the importance of that remaining in the tax bill?
My focus over the last few weeks has been to determine if the letter that I sent to the North Carolina delegation and the President of the United States asking for a repeal of the health insurance fee, the premium tax, which he reported on, that's been my primary focus. So I'm trying to figure, that is not in the bill that you just referenced, and that's where my total focus is. But I think I can answer your question by saying that as the chair of the Local Government Commission, as the treasurer of North Carolina, where I have the responsibility of building the case to maintain North Carolina's AAA bond rating, both for our state, and then having a solvent state government for our local municipalities. I think having the tax-exempt status on these bonds maintained is very important. Our staff is reviewing the very question that you've asked us. I do know that the yields on municipal bonds, since this package was announced, yields have gone down, which means the price of and the value of bonds has gone up. So it looks like the market feels like that the tax-exempt status of municipal bonds, at least in the eyes of how the market is voting, is very much intact.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Okay, thanks, Dan. Ria Rao.
Hi, Treasurer Folwell. Good morning.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Great.
Congratulations on launching your internal index. So moving from 100 million to 12.5 billion is quite an ambitious goal. I was wondering, I'm sure this would be a top priority for the new CEO that comes in. Are there any updates on, the CIO? Are there any updates on the CIO search?
There are no updates. As you can imagine, I receive lots of calls, letters, emails, and every other kind of thing that you can imagine for people who have an interest in being the Director of Investment Management Division here. I'm very satisfied months after making that decision that the decision to have interim heads of that division by the names of Jeff Smith, who's been there for 26 years, and Chris Morris, who's been with us 10 years, and previous to that with State Street. We're confident that that was the, in light of the unexpected departure of Kevin Sechrist, that was the decision that I thought would bring the most stability and clarity and certainty to the investment management division. So we're continuing that process, but we're here today to celebrate in a very public way this news of putting a bow on this in-house index product, and I'm sure that whoever fills that role in the future is going to be on board with this idea.
Okay. And so the 100 million that's currently in the internal index, did that come from your cash reserves, or were there more managers that were terminated?
Great question. Correct me, folks, if I'm wrong, but the first, the 50 million came from the cash, and another 50 million came from one of our external passive U.S. equity index managers.
Okay. So that manager's whatever you had allocated to that manager was completely terminated or partially redeemed?
Very partially, slightly.
Okay. Okay. And you said that you're not adding any more staff, but how many people do you have on the team currently managing this internal index?
We got a bad connection. Your question was the number of people that we have on our team that are managing the index?
That's right, yeah.
We have Greg and Casey. We have Rhonda as the director of the equities division. We have folks that we consult with on this. We have a couple of vendors that we've used to help us with some of the back office stuff. And if you'd like for any of them to speak and then give you a little more color on your question, we'd be glad to do so.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Ria. Hazel, we'll get back to you in a minute. Is there anyone else? I should just go do this quickly. Anybody else on the call that would like a question that hasn't already asked one?
Yeah, this is Dave Milderberg down in Charlotte. Hope you all are doing well.
Doing well, thank you.
You mentioned foreign portfolio. How much money is in that, and what is your time scheme as far as looking at passive investment of that?
We'll try to. We can't use the word scheme around here, Dave. So, anyway, I'm gonna let Rhonda, if she doesn't know the answer, or Greg or Casey off the top of their head, then we'll get back to you in the next hour. So, I guess the question is, do we have any passive outside?
No, I'm sorry, I wasn't clear. How much money do you have invested in foreign equities, and how much of that is passive that you eventually hope to manage in-house?
Right now, foreign equities.
It's around 16 billion in non-US equities, and a little under half of that's passive.
So about 16 billion outside the U.S. and
it's about 7.5.
About 7.5 of that is passive.
And just so us non-financial people understand, when you say take in-house, instead of you sending the money to Vanguard, paying them 20 basis points or whatever, you're going to save the 20 basis points, and the right folks in your office are going to do the tracking the indexes.
Exactly right, and the additional, I guess we'll call it in the accounting world, the variable cost associated with lighting this up is around $150,000.
A little over. Yeah.
Yeah. So the variable cost associated with announcing this morning is about a total of about $150,000, and of course, the more money that we put in the program, that actually is more of a fixed cost. Actually,
so a lot of that's really all in, and a big portion of that cost is already being paid for. We're leveraging some of the technology that fixed income is currently using.
The fixed income is managed in-house currently.
Yeah. Dave, we have about $37 billion of all of our fixed income is pretty much managed in-house. And what Casey was referring to, this is a kind of a small example, but we're paying for Bloomberg machines that had this capability or this platform or this analytics that we weren't already paying for, but we weren't using it to its fullest extent. So there's lots of little things inside the investment management division that we may have been using 50 or 60% of the capability of whatever that it was, and now we're able to use more. So we're very excited about it, and we're one of the.
You said that. You said this.
We're one of the last states, especially of our size, that did not have an in-house index product. Go ahead.
You mentioned you've been looking at this. The office has been looking at this back 3 years. Have you guys talked to people outside of the of your office on you recommending this?
Right.
Yes, we've engaged with a number of our peer pension plans and spoke at length with them about the capabilities of running internally, what type of resourcing did they utilize, what type of technology and systems did they currently utilize, and just tried to get an understanding of the breadth of those capabilities. And right now, I mean, the way the Treasurer has explained it is we are on training wheels. We're starting with a small allocation, and as we ramp up, we will continue to evaluate the technology and resources needed. But right now, what we have, and we anticipate through pulling in all of the U.S. passive dollars, that we have the resources, the staffing needed to necessarily maintain management and oversight.
I will add to what Rhonda said, Dave, that it's very important to understand that they've been in a running a shadow portfolio for a number of months, and then we launched this on November 1st with $100 million, and we're going to make sure that everything is done properly, which so far it is, and we're getting accolades from people who have watched people do this in the past, and they have sent me emails about how hard our team worked, how anticipatory and thoughtful they were about things that needed to be done. Timelines, anytime you have a situation like this, timelines are very important. But going back to Rhonda's point, we were very interested. I'm sure they were when they were talking to other pension plans who have done this, as well as the folks that we've been paying to help teach us about this over the last couple of years. The red is what did they do that they wish they hadn't done. The yellow is what did they do that they wish they'd done more of, and the green is what did they not think of that they wish they had. And this team has sort of taken all those things into context before they initiated this on November 1st.
Yeah, I had two other questions, but I didn't want to hog the mic. So
no, you're good. Go ahead, Dave.
Well, one is, not related to this, but the UNC Board of Governors has been talking about consolidating their issuance, so rather than each campus issuing bonds, that it'd be a kind of a more of a consolidated effort. Is that something you have studied, and do you support that?
I have studied it. I have not studied it. Therefore, I'm neutral on the idea. I need to obviously confer with Greg Gaskins, who you're very familiar with, had a long career in Charlotte, who is the head of our local government commission, and also our bond council, some of which is in Charlotte, to understand what the meaning of all it is. We know that our state is according to a lot of groups who've come out over the last 2 months, is one of the most financially strong and stable states in the United States. We know that we have one of the five best funded pension systems in the United States, but one of the worst funded unfunded health care plans in the United States. I know and instinctively think that we have one of the we are probably one of the few states who can really truly pull ourselves out of these OPEB, unfunded pension and health care liabilities. And how all that relates to your question is that, given those as our primary goals is how to sustain these plans, that we have the constitutional and statutory responsibilities and duties for managing, we're always cautious and curious about any plan to do anything that we think could impact that. So I would say stay tuned.
Yeah, I didn't mean to, to put you on the spot there. Just my understanding from board members is that they're going to vote on this in December. They, apparently discussed it this month, going to vote on it in December, and it strikes, apparently that timeline hasn't been communicated to you.
It hasn't, but it doesn't mean that it has not been communicated to the Local Government Commission. And
right, gotcha.
The UNC system, for example, I'm the sole fiduciary of our defined contribution plan, 401k, 457, 403b. Is in terms of enrollees, it's one of the largest, if not the largest, plans of its type in the world. But we don't manage the defined contribution plan for the UNC system, for example.
Okay.
But they have an ORP retirement system over there that's just specific to them. So there are some things that the UNC system does, but anything that reduces complexity and builds value for them, for us, or for the participants or the taxpayers of this state, obviously I'm going to be in favor of, but I will have you an answer specifically about our internal timeline about analyzing this by the end of the day today.
Well, my other question was a little far afield, but you've invoked Mr. Boyles many times, and here we're looking at a federal tax, and he obviously always talked about federal deficit and the troubles, and here we're looking at a tax reform bill, $1.5 trillion isn't paid for, and is that something that you as a treasurer have some bells going off in your head, or do you see that as a concern?
Well, I as I've said to you before, our goal here is this is like yoga. We have to breathe and pay attention to our mat. And our mat currently is pretty full with trying to figure out how to sustain the pension plan for the next 50 years and how to solve this unfunded healthcare crisis. And to make sure that within my responsibilities as state treasurer, that we're not running a deficit situation in any way, shape, or form. We have the belief that we're one of 12 states that has the AAA bond rating, and we know that that's going to be tougher and tougher to achieve over the next 5 years. But if any one state has it, we want it to be North Carolina, and we're not distracted off of that.
Dave, you got any other questions?
Well, I mean, they're planning. They say they want to get this done by New Year's Eve. So I just kind of interested in, just to put it to you again, is it, do you think it's advisable to take that kind of a deficit busting approach?
Well, I've never been in favor, and I've never, either as a school board member or the member of the General Assembly or as treasurer, been in a situation where I could run a deficit in any way, shape, or form. So that's generally how I feel about deficits.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it. I'll give one more chance to anybody who perhaps has not asked a question yet. Anybody on?
Let's go back to
Hazel, that means it's all yours now. Shoot away.
Okay, how much time do you have?
As much time as you need, Hazel. You know that.
Okay, thank you. That's the right answer. So I have a bunch of questions about how this change affects things like your investment policy statement, your asset allocations, or the asset liability studies that have led to the policy. Will all these other pieces change now because of this?
I'll defer that to Rhonda.
Well, we are looking at working with our legal team to make updates to our investment policy statement to incorporate the use of internal equity management. In terms of our asset allocation, as we continue to work with the treasurer on looking at plan level asset allocation, will largely determine the sizing in years to come of what that passive allocation looks like and what the impact would be on overall plan asset allocation.
But would you do a formal study or an asset liability study or change the policy statement itself?
We are simultaneously looking at all those things, but it really is not driven by this announcement today. These are things that had to be, some of these things have to be done every year, every 2 years. Number one, investment policy statements and all that needs to be refreshed, which is it's just this managing this money in-house is not driving any of those processes. We were going down parallel tracks to look at all those things with our legal team and the investment management division.
Okay. But how does it change? How does this affect your risk and return profile? Isn't that something that you've been looking at, or been advised to look at a lower risk, lower return strategy?
Sure.
Well, I think so. The short answer is, since we're not increasing our exposure to passive, we're just bringing in the same exposure that we have with external managers. It's not really impacting the risk and return profile at all. In fact, we're going to be tracking the same indexes that our external managers were tracking. So it's just a matter of bringing the capabilities in-house to increase control and transparency, as well as the benefit of having more enriched dialogue with our external managers.
Okay. And on that note, when you talk about dialogue with managers, how does this let's talk about public equity in general as far as its performance, and then also your drive to lower fees. Will this change in asset allocation affect performance of equities or of the broader plan, and how does that compare to the fees that have been saved?
Based on what Casey just said, I don't see any effect of this on as it relates to your question.
Okay.
Any negative effect?
Right. I was going to say, it's supposed to say, I mean, you're hoping it has positive effects, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And I do have questions about other investments since you've taken office. Have the plan made any investments, or what's your strategy for your first year as far as any new investments?
We have, we're in the 7th or 8th inning in looking at a new investment. Obviously, every week things have been brought to me about extensions of investments that sort of lived past their what was contemplated to be their life expectancy. We are closely monitoring the $10 billion of uncalled capital that we have on the portfolio. Obviously, all of that will not be. Some of that will not be ever drawn down because they're outside the investment period. We're looking at cash flow from the liquidation, where people are equitizing or closing down certain funds and sending us cash back. So right now, and I hate to do this off the cuff, but I'm going to attempt to. I think from my memory, and I've got a pretty good memory, in that the cash flow of money that's coming back to us off of certain investments, whether it's real estate, alternative investments, or the like, the cash flow from that is pretty much completely offsetting the amount of money that's going out on commitments that have been made over the last 2 years.
A new commitment?
Yes. Well, these are old
existing commitments. Okay.
Existing commitments where the capital, they have the check, they just had not written it yet.
And now you don't need to find the money for that?
Correct.
Because you've got the cash flow. Okay.
And it's always, history is very important. In fiscal year into 2016, the pension plan had negative cash flow. If you look at the amount of money we're sending out every month in year to participants versus the contributions coming in from the state, the employee, and investment gains. We had negative cash flow in the fiscal year into 2016. Obviously, that will not be the case in fiscal. It was not the case in fiscal year 2017. Most likely will not be the case for calendar year 2017. So we're just looking at all this through the processes, many of which were established when Kevin was here. So we're not trying to recreate or break anything. We're trying to follow those processes, and as things come up that need to be refreshed, looked at, or a new study needs to be made because it's the kind of thing you do every 2 years, then we're doing those things also.
Well, on the note about the pension plan funding level, I'm fumbling for a question here. Will this change anything about the funded level?
Will the announcement we're making today change anything about the funded level of the state pension plan? Is that your question?
Or do you have other plans that will? Not just today's announcement, but your plans for the...
Yeah. Well, let me say that the announcement that we're making today will have zero negative impact and maybe even a possible positive impact from the fees that we're saving in terms of the fundedness of the state pension plan. Secondly, you heard me say back in February or March that it was my intention, which I am assessing 1 year at a time, to lower the assumed rate of return. You know better than anyone in the world that the better funded plan that you have, the harder it is to do that. When your plan's 30% funded, you can lower the investment return anything you want to because you weren't funding it to start with. Every time that we lower our assumed rate of return by 5 basis points, it costs the General Assembly about $82 million a year recurring. So we did that for calendar year 2017, from 7.25 down to 7.2. I anticipate that I'm going to be recommending to the board in the first or second board meeting in 2018 that we'll be lowering it another 5 basis points for that year. So obviously, anytime that you lower that 5 basis points, it does have a tangential impact on the funded level.
Okay.
And also, you know better than most that when we just went through our reaffirming our triple-A bond rating, may get these confused. I apologize, but Fitch did not accept my 7.2. They used a 6. They used a 6. One of the other rating agencies, I think, used a 4.56, which means in their eyes our plan is not 91% funded and 95% for the elders. It's lower than that. So we're a big military state, and people use the term I, and what that really means is I hear you, I understand what you've said to me, and I'm going to do something about it. And when the rating agencies are running all of our fundedness through a filter of an assumed rate of return much lower than ours, then I want to make sure that they know that we're acknowledging that and we're doing the best we can. But to reiterate, if our plan was 40% funded, we could take this assumed rate of return down to any level we wanted to. But this General Assembly has been and continues to be fully committed to fully funding the pension plan, and they have put in tens of millions of dollars in extra to not only offset the lower returns in relation to what the assumed rate of return was, but also to anticipate these further reductions in the assumed rate of return going forward.
Okay, so what they are anticipating that you're going to ask and it will be lowered?
Yes, and there's no lawyers in this room, and that's not a good thing or a bad thing, but I have to be careful in my remarks when it comes to asset liability studies, when it comes to actuaries. I have to be careful in my remarks when I say I'm going to do something 3 years from now. Because if I say I'm going to do that 3 years from now, then it sort of tells the people who are analyzing all this data about life expectancies and payouts and all the other things that go into the asset liability model. It says, well, if the treasurer is going to recommend this go to 7.05 during his term, then maybe we should be assuming that when we do our funding level. So we are doing this step by step in conjunction with all the partners. And we're not just talking about Wall Street or the media or the General Assembly or the actuaries. We're talking about the stakeholders. The State Employees Association and all the participants that are represented by groups who have money in this plan, to make the League of Municipalities, the County Commissioner Association, the National Guard, all the people that have money in this plan. We're doing this in a way that brings certainty and stability to the plan.
Mm-hmm. And what is the current funded level?
The current funded level for the teasers plan is 90.8%, about 91%. The funded level for the Elders, the local government plan, which makes up about 30% of our assets, that plan is 95% funded. You probably, and other people in this call probably asked their question, how could two plans managed in the same building by the same group with the same sole fiduciary being the treasurer, whoever it happened to be, how could they be that different? And it really goes back to the eighth wonder of the world, the compounding of interest. And in 2001, after 9/11, the cities and the counties, which make up the predominance of the Elders plan, they did not take their foot off the funding gas. They kept their foot on the gas. And just that difference of 1 year of funding, fully funding the pension plan in 2001 when the state did not do that and actually had to borrow some money out of the plan to get through that crisis, that one thing has made the difference in one plan being 95% funded and the other one being 91% funded.
When you say they kept the foot on the gas, who's the they?
Great question. These are all the cities and the counties that pay money into the pension plan on behalf of all the city and the county employees across North Carolina. So,
right, but who decided to keep the pedal to the metal?
It was the recommendation by a board. It's an advisory board made up of a lot of financial officers and county managers and city managers, finance officers from across the state, and they're the ones that, when working in conjunction with us, set the contribution rates. So they said they wanted a contribution rate. I wasn't here then, obviously. They wanted a contribution rate that reflected to stay the course and keep doing what they did in 2000 and 1999, 1998, 1996. Whatever plan and system and funding pattern they were on, they wanted to stay on that even after the 9/11 crisis.
So it was just the funding decision, not the investment decision.
Absolutely. Sorry, I wasn't more clear about that. Yeah.
Okay, that's okay. And so what do you have an investment advisory committee meeting coming up next week?
We do.
So what are you going to do at that meeting?
We're setting that agenda about 20 minutes after I get off this call. Basically, it'll be going through the normal things that we go through in the investment advisory committee, but the passive Greg, Casey, and Rhonda are going to much of the meeting is going to be spent on really talking about how they put a bow on this thing that the investment advisory committee's been hearing about for a long, long time.
Mm-hmm. How long?
3 years.
Okay. It was just a personal question because I was hoping to come down to it, and I didn't know if it was going to be beyond what you've all talked about today.
No, and we want to make sure, I'm sorry you can't be here, you're always welcome, but I want to make sure that we have you fully set up to join us by phone.
Oh, perfect. Thank you very much. I am still trying. I haven't given up yet because it would be nice to see everybody. And the last question I had is about your Lower the Fees campaign. Are you done? What's left?
Well, we're not done because people keep sending things in here voluntarily offering to lower their fees.
The preemptive? Now, why would they do that?
Rhonda, I mean, am I exaggerating?
No, he's not.
I don't know. I mean, I'm just sitting here, and Rhonda will send me an email, or one of the other groups will send me an email and say so and so is written in, and sometimes it's the old MFN situation where they've lowered the fees. They've lowered the fees for somebody else, and they know that we're looking at this stuff, and they know we're going to catch it at some point, and so they're writing in saying they've lowered the fees for this, and here's the new agreement with lower fees. Some of it is people. Obviously, I've called every money manager, and I can't say this for certain, but oftentimes there's a possibility we could be hitting break points with where we have a fee reduction. We have an $11 billion defined contribution plan, and we want to make sure that people who are managing money in the defined contribution plan, who are also managing money in the defined benefit plan, are giving us the benefit of those free break points. So all of the above, and so I have not made any outgoing calls in the last 3 months about fees. And to reiterate, the calls that I made in the first 6 months, and Rhonda was in many of those meetings with me, we were just asking 4 basic questions. Who are you, where are you, how good are you, and how much are we paying you? I will say that not necessarily in the equity group, but we're finding out there's a different term for fees. That things that I would think was a fee wasn't counted as a fee. So we're now turning our attention to that. So there's a chance with as I said earlier, we're trying to figure out what's right, get it right, keep it right. There's a chance that based on some of the returns that we're seeing, that even in light of the fee reductions that we have negotiated, the fees could actually go up, and they could go up because of payouts, and that doesn't change anything with us. So we're constantly monitoring that, but we're also I'm pretty certain that if we're paying somebody a fee, that we're going to call it a fee.
So you'll be combing through other names for them and just putting in writing what you're paying in fees. You're going to reclassify them as fees, and then do you expect another number? Or is it just around the margin?
No, my instinct is that there'll be another number, and
okay.
I don't like saying that. That's just my instinct.
Yeah.
I had another thought on your question, but go ahead and ask your next question. I'm sure I'll be able to come back to it.
No, this is interesting because everybody, I think, public, private, home office struggles with what am I really paying?
Yeah, and your publication is, your publication has done a great job of highlighting. It's like the commercial with the guy my age who's on the jog with the daughter, with his daughter, and she says, what are you paying? And he's sitting there doing this jog with her like he's the expert on money manager, and then she asks one little simple question, and he can't answer it.
Yeah, I don't think that's ever. I don't know. Well, let me know if you crack that code, because everybody would want to know.
Well, the new things I'm interested in that I didn't have a clue about this time last year is what's a fee and what's not. Are people sending us the net proceeds when they should be sending us the gross proceeds, and then we remit a check back to them for the fee. Are we being charged fees on leverage? Are we being properly charged fees on on the initial commitment versus AUM? Just thinking outside the box here. I've already used the word leverage. You know, if we give you $300 million and you go out and leverage it up $300 million, are you charging us fees on $600 million?
Yeah.
The committed capital versus the investment capital fees, and then all the other things, the things that you've reported on. It's a pretty serious subject with me, and I know you prefaced this by saying the word campaign. This is the right thing to do, and it's one of the three things that I told the voters that I would do when I applied for this job. The other one I'm doing right now, which is to, bring transparency to the office. And I want to say, and I know we're not closing our conversation here, but a lot of the things that I'm reporting on or do, or Kevin set them in motion, the previous treasurer set them in motion, and we're just sort of putting a bow on some of those things. So that's it.
So I should keep asking.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And when we find stuff, and I don't think it's really in your wheelhouse, but we're spending a lot of time on disbursements. We're spending a lot of time on not just the amount of money that goes out here in fees. We're spending time on the amount of money that goes out here to pensioners who don't deserve it, or people who are getting more than one check, or
double dipping.
We won a lawsuit today in the North Carolina Court of Appeals on offsets of disability. People who've been getting more than one pension check for the same amount since the early 80s.
Have you had to build up your, for lack of a better word, your enforcement team to do that? How do you get better at that?
Well, it's amazing, and I witnessed this when I was Assistant Secretary of Commerce trying to reform the unemployment system. It's amazing what state employees, when they know you're going to stand behind them, and they know that their direction is to tell the truth, do the right thing, let chips fall where they may. It's amazing the creativity and the hard work that just the state employees that are already here and the ideas that they've had for years. It's amazing what they can come up with. Too often, these folks have had creative ideas about how to cut down fraud. And by the way, this whole word about waste, fraud, and abuse, this is not Democrat, Republican, or Independent. This is justice. And this is about greed. And just knowing that somebody in this office is going to stand behind them. We've received some negative press over the last couple of months. We had a situation where we found people who had not properly offset their disability income with the fact they'd been certified to be federally Social Security disabled. They were supposed to be offsetting those payments for the payments we were giving them. And, we don't pick and choose which of these folks we try to collect money from. We apply the law. If I don't like the law, then I try to go to the General Assembly and change it. But we're trying to apply the law because any time that somebody has gotten a payment out of this system, then that is being financed on the backs of all the other unwilling participants in the system that didn't know it was going on.
I have a question about the 4 questions you asked, back to the fee conversation.
Yeah.
You said, where are you, how good are you, how much are we paying, and what was the 4th?
How good are you?
Yeah. Where are you, how good are you, how much are we paying you?
Oh, yeah. Well, who are you, which is AUM.
Who are you? Okay.
Yeah. Who are you? Where are you? How good are you, and how much are we paying?
But what's the where are you question? What does it matter where they are? What do you mean, physically?
Yeah, just because I don't know.
You just want to know.
Yeah, well, it's where they are and where they're invested, and so.
Okay.
It's just I'm not the. I'm not going to attempt to use an analogy here. I try my best to. These are all 12-minute conversations.
Yeah.
Every one of them, and I just try to connect with, who they are or where they are. Obviously.
Well, the reason I ask is that the past elections, the issue of keep the fees in state or keep the investment in state, is that conversation reappearing?
Well, I don't know of a better example of that than what we announced this morning. We're not keeping it in the state. We're keeping it in the building.
Yeah, but you're not giving a North Carolina manager the business.
Yeah, we have not. I think what I said during the campaign is that there's a lot of things going on with that, but at the end of the day, the where are you is just trying to connect. I mean, everybody in this room and on this call knows the best investor of our lifetime is not in any place that anybody would expect him to be, which is Omaha, Nebraska. Just. And if you've been, I've been a mentor of his in absentia, or met him several times, been in his office several times. But if you've been studying him for the last 25 years, he's a little bit at a time. He talks about in his annual reports about groupthink and getting outside the chaos and really looking at what the investment opportunities are without all the chaos that sometimes occurs in the major financial centers. But
how does he feel about passive investing?
I don't have any indication other than he's a huge fan. I mean, he said that. He said that in his annual reports.
Yeah.
I've only met John Bogle a couple times, but obviously he's a fan of passive investing, and we know that the pendulum of passive versus active, it's on a swing. It's been on a swing. We don't know how or where it stops, but that's our responsibility while we are in the world of active investing, that we do it with the least amount of complexity that brings the most amount of value to our participants, and that's what these folks represent here today with this announcement.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you, Hazel.
Good to see you.
I hope to see you soon.
Yeah, I hope so, Hazel. Well, I'll give you a call. We can coordinate. Anybody else on the call that needs to ask a question?
Yeah, I just had one last question.
Hey, Red.
Hi. So you said that from the 50 million that was redeemed partially from an external manager, who was that manager?
That manager was Piedmont Management, where that is also the management company that's been providing us consulting advice over the last 3 years about how to do this.
Okay. Sorry, what's it called? How do you spell the name?
Piedmont.
No, they weren't surprised.
Sorry? Yeah, they're the ones that have been consultant advisor, maybe. They've been our advisor. The previous treasurer and chief investment officer entered into a relationship with them over the last several years ago. They have an in-house index passive product to educate us on how to set this up and how to like it, and that's what we're doing.
Okay, so they kind of expected this to come, and how much more do they manage right now? Or the treasury?
Right now they have total firm right now they have a total firm assets of about $6.5 billion, and 3.6 billion of that is passive.
But how much of your money do they have?
About 3.4.
3.4 is from you. Okay.
Okay, so 3.4 billion is from you before 50 million was redeemed, or is this the after figure?
Yeah, it's at the margin. Yeah.
Okay, got it. Yeah, and I'm just wondering, your passive managers, external passive managers are obviously aware of this big initiative to bring passive management in-house. Are they trying to negotiate with you on this? Are they, trying to lower fees or offer different products so they can still stay on the roster?
Yes, I would say that, and we have no objection to people, doing their jobs, no matter where they are doing them, and that's a business decision that they make, that our business decision, and as I want to reiterate, I'm just here to put a bow on this. Our business decision is to bring this in-house, and it's something that's been in the works for almost 3 years, and thanks to these folks in this room, it's actually happened.
Okay, thanks.
Rhea, this is Casey. I just wanted to add that our external managers that are managing passive U.S. equities for us are actually offering assistance and advice as we continue down this initiative. So they're very, very much aware and offering their assistance.
And the focus is a strategic partnership with North Carolina. So, they are willing to assist us in ways that they understand meet the need of institutional investors.
Got it. Okay. Great. Thank you so much.
As we close, Greg.
No, just echo what these guys say. I think having these relationships with the external managers is something we're able to leverage and makes us better at being able to do this internally or cheaper.
I just want to thank you again for your support and for demonstrating your confidence in us and getting up and running. And we expect to make it worth your while and continue scaling it up.
And I just wanted to reiterate, this has been a 3-year initiative, but it's been an initiative that's been taken on by the entire Department of State Treasurer, and with Jeff Smith and Christopher Morris, our interim CIO individuals. They've actually provided a lot of support to us as well. Jeff has had experience on both the equities and the fixed income side, and Chris has had extensive operational experience. So they've been very supportive and aided us and guided us in this initiative over the last 3 years.
And I want to thank them for being here. 8 minutes till 10, they didn't know they were doing it, and they performed greatly. So thank you. Thank you all, and David, thank you for your other questions regarding bondedness and things dealing with healthcare, and Dan and all the others on the call.